Okay, so you want to own a cruise ship, not a cabin on one. The whole thing. 10 decks, 6,000 passengers, your name on the hull. You picture endless buffets, a captain who reports to you, and a river of ticket money flowing in every time the ship leaves port. Here's the strange part. The ticket is the least profitable thing on that ship. Royal Caribbean and Carnival didn't build the two most profitable travel companies on Earth by selling you a cruise. They built it by selling you a floating city where the exit doesn't exist for 7 days, and the real business starts the second you walk up the gangway. And if you've ever priced out a cruise for yourself and thought the number on the website was the actual cost of the trip, that's not an accident either. It's the first move in the exact same game the company is playing at the corporate level, one level up. Understand how the ship itself is financed, taxed, and staffed, and you'll understand why your budget cruise never once stayed on budget. So let's actually do the math on what owning one of these looks like, because the fantasy and the balance sheet are two very different ships. The sticker price is the first shock. Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, the largest cruise ship on the planet, cost roughly $2 billion to build, not the whole fleet. One ship, her sister vessel, Legend of the Seas, came in even higher, at more than 2 billion euros, once fitting out and outfitting costs were added to the hull price. For comparison, most Carnival and Princess ships run around $750 million. MSC's newest mega ship, MSC World Europa, came in around $1.25 billion. Even the smaller vessels in the fleet, ships nobody's writing headlines about, still cost $500 million minimum. Every operator in this industry is locked in the same arms race. Each new class more expensive than the last, because the ship itself has become the advertisement. Here's what that number is actually made of. It's not paint and deck chairs. It's steel, propulsion, and fuel systems first. Icon of the Seas runs on liquefied natural gas instead of traditional bunker fuel, which sounds like an environmental upgrade, and it is, but it's also a multi-hundred-million-dollar engineering decision baked into that $2 billion figure before a single cabin gets carpeted. Then comes the part that actually sells tickets. The water park, the ice rink, Central Park, an entire deck of live landscaping with over 12,000 real plants. None of that generates $1 of revenue on its own. It exists purely to be photographed. So the ship sells itself before you've even boarded. Here's what nobody tells you about who actually pays that $2 billion. You don't pay it in cash. Nobody does. Cruise lines finance new ships the way you'd finance a house you can't actually afford. Except the mortgage is a syndicated loan backed by export credit agencies in the country that built it. Icon of the Seas and Legend of the Seas were both built at Meyer Turku in Finland. That means Finnish and German export credit guarantees quietly sit underneath the debt, because no private lender wants to hold $2 billion of exposure to a single asset with no resale market if the whole thing sinks, or the industry stalls again the way it did in 2020. And it takes years before that ship earns back what it cost. Icon of the Seas was first ordered under a project codename back in 2016. She didn't carry a single paying passenger until January 2024. 7 years of interest quietly accruing on a $2 billion loan before one drink was ever sold on board. That's the part the brochure skips. You're not buying a ship. You're buying a decade-long financing structure with a boat welded to the front of it. Here's the trapdoor under the floor. You're standing on a piece of Panama, owned by a company that pays close to nothing to the country whose flag is painted on the terminal you walk through to get there. Meanwhile, the port fees, the passenger service charges, the sales tax on your onboard purchases, those get collected and passed through just fine. The company just never lets its own profits sit in a jurisdiction that would tax it. The flag doesn't just cut the tax bill. It cuts the labor bill too, and this is where the economics get uncomfortable. Because the ship is registered under Bahamian, Panamanian, or Marshall Islands maritime law, rather than U.S. or European labor law, cruise lines aren't bound by the minimum wage or overtime rules of the countries their passengers actually come from. Median pay for shipboard crew, cabin stewards, waitstaff, kitchen workers commonly land somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 a month. One crew member who worked as a casino assistant on a major line reported making close to $4,000 a month, and that's a mid-tier role, not an entry-level one. Officers, chief engineers, and captains earn considerably more, for the $8,000 a month and up, plus specialists like ship's doctors and headline entertainers brought on for short, well-paid contracts. And that pay comes attached to a schedule no land-based job in a wealthy country would legally offer. Contracts commonly run 6 to 10 months at sea, 7 days a week, with no day off for the length of the assignment. Room and board are covered, which is real value and worth acknowledging, and a meaningful share of a steward's or waiter's actual take-home pay comes from the automatic gratuity added to your bill, not the base salary the company quietly discloses in a filing. The flag reaches further than the paycheck, too. The Passenger Vessel Services Act restricts foreign-flagged ships from sailing directly between 2 U.S. ports without stopping at a foreign port somewhere in between, a 19th-century law originally written to protect American shipping that now quietly dictates the itinerary of almost every cruise sold out of a U.S. city. That's the actual reason a Hawaii cruise out of California almost always detours through Ensenada, Mexico first, and why an Alaska cruise out of Seattle nearly always touches Victoria, Canada. It isn't a scenic choice. It's a foreign-flagged ship satisfying 100-year-old American law before it's legally allowed to complete the route you actually booked. Break the crew down by tier, and the picture gets sharper. Entry-level housekeeping and waitstaff sit at the bottom, commonly $1,000 to $5,000 a month before tips. Skilled technical roles, electricians, IT staff, mid-level officers, sit in the middle for $8,000. Above them, chief engineers and ship's doctors, along with the captain, earn the most on board, and headline entertainers brought in for short contract cannot earn all of them for a 2-week run. But the vast majority of the 2,000-plus crew keeping a mega ship running sit in that bottom tier, doing the labor passengers actually interact with the most. Now let's talk about the debt, because this is where the fantasy of owning a cruise line collides hardest with reality. Carnival Corporation was carrying north of $35 billion in total debt at the pandemic peak in 2022, a number that's since come down to somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 billion. Built up largely from the years every ship in the fleet sat empty in a harbor while the interest kept accruing anyway. In a single recent quarter, Carnival paid $377 million in net interest expense, plus over $200 million more in debt extinguishment and modification costs from refinancing old loans into new ones. That's on top of running the ships. The dividend, the thing that actually rewards an owner for owning something, was suspended in 2020 and still hasn't fully returned. Carnival has spent the years since refinancing that debt in multi-billion-dollar chunks, paying down what it can, selling a handful of older ships outright, and reporting record revenue quarter after quarter that runs largely through interest payments before a shareholder ever sees a cent of it. So here's the real ownership structure, laid out simply. First in line, the export credit-backed shipyard lenders who financed the $2 billion new build. Second in line, the bondholders who financed the last decade of fleet expansion and the pandemic-era survival loans. Third, whatever's left over. The equity holder, the actual owner in the fantasy version of this video. The romantic version is a captain's hat and a horizon. The actual version is a capital structure where the equity holder gets whatever's left. If anything is left, after $2 billion of hull financing gets serviced first, every single quarter, storm or no storm, full ship or empty one. And notice what management is actually optimizing for underneath all of it. Carnival's own executives talk about return on invested capital and adjusted EBITDA per available lower berth on every earnings call, not profit per passenger and not customer happiness. Those metrics exist to answer one question for the lenders and the shareholders. Is every single berth on that ship generating enough cash to justify the debt used to build it? The vacation is the product. The berth is the financial unit. Once you see a cruise ship as a spreadsheet of berths competing for occupancy against a fixed debt load, the entire pricing strategy, the aggressive discounting in slow seasons, the relentless push to fill every cabin even at a loss on the ticket, stops looking strange and starts looking like exactly what is. Segment 6. So who actually profits from a cruise ship? Let's go through the candidates one at a time, because on paper, for different parties could plausibly claim to be the winner here, and only two of them actually are. Not the passenger. He pays a competitive ticket price to win the click, then gets extracted from at every bar, casino table, and gift shop for the next 7 days, walking off the ship having spent 30 to 50% more than the fare that got him a book. Not the crew. They work 60-plus hour weeks, 7 days a week, for months at a stretch, for a fraction of what a comparable job on land would pay in the country their passengers come from, in exchange for room, board, and a tip line doing the heavy lifting on their actual income. Not even the flag country. Panama and the Bahamas collect a modest registration fee and a tonnage tax for the privilege of hosting the corporate address, and otherwise stay completely out of the way of a company generating billions in profit under their name. The real winners are two parties who rarely appear in the marketing at all. The institutional shareholders who bought in after the pandemic collapse, when the stock was priced like the company might not survive the year, and have since watched Carnival post 10 consecutive quarters of record revenue and its highest return on invested capital in nearly 2 decades. And the export credit-backed lenders who finance the ships in the first place, who get paid ahead of everyone else in line, rain or shine, full ship or empty one, every single quarter for the next 25 years that hull stays in the water. Put the whole picture together and the fantasy from the opening of this video quietly falls apart. You wanted a ship, a crew, and a captain who answers to you. What you'd actually be buying is a $2 billion loan registered under a flag that taxes almost nothing, staffed by workers earning a fraction of what the passengers do, generating most of its real profit from a bar tab and a slot machine rather than the fare that got everyone through the door. The cruise ship isn't a business that sells vacations. It's a dead instrument registered under a flag that owes it nothing, that happens to come with a buffet. If you made it this far, hit subscribe because we're about to walk into a business running the exact same trick in plain sight, just on land instead of water. Next time, we're breaking down the economics of owning a car dealership, and the number that actually keeps the lights on there has almost nothing to do with the car you drove off the lot.